Right now, something is happening in our solar system that has never been observed in the entire history of astronomy. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this could fundamentally rewrite our understanding of physics itself. The interstellar visitor we've been tracking, 3I Atlas, has just triggered a phenomenon so bizarre, so completely unprecedented, that scientists are scrambling to explain it using conventional theories. But here's what troubles me as a theoretical physicist. Every mundane explanation we've attempted simply collapses under the weight of observational data. So we're left facing a question that makes even seasoned researchers profoundly uncomfortable. What exactly did 3I Atlas activate as it passed through our solar system? And more importantly, why is this phenomenon intensifying as we approach October 29th, the moment of perihelion when this enigmatic visitor will reach its closest point to our Sun? Let me take you back to October 15th, just 2 weeks before the critical perihelion passage. The Hubble Space Telescope, repositioned specifically to monitor this enigmatic visitor during its final approach, captured something that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of electromagnetic physics. A ripple. Not in space itself, though that would be extraordinary enough. Not in the fabric of space-time, though Einstein's equations would at least provide us a framework for interpretation. No. What Hubble detected was a ripple in something far stranger. The local electromagnetic field surrounding 3I Atlas appeared to be oscillating in patterns that propagated outward like waves on a cosmic pond, extending millions of kilometers in every direction. Dr. Sarah Chen from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics was the first to notice the anomaly buried in the spectroscopic data. She described it to me personally just yesterday, and I could hear the mixture of excitement and disbelief in her voice. "Michio," she said, "we're measuring coherent electromagnetic oscillations emanating from 3I Atlas with a frequency of exactly 1.42 gigahertz. That's the hydrogen line, the most fundamental frequency in the universe. But here's what doesn't make sense. Natural sources producing emissions at this frequency should exhibit random phase variations, statistical noise, chaotic fluctuations. What we're observing shows phase coherence across measurement intervals spanning hours. That's not natural, that's organized." Think about what she's describing for a moment. The hydrogen line at 1.42 gigahertz represents the frequency emitted when hydrogen atoms flip their electron spin states. It's often called the universal frequency because any technologically advanced civilization would immediately recognize its significance. SETI researchers have monitored this frequency for decades, searching for artificial signals from distant civilizations. And now, an interstellar object passing through our solar system is broadcasting at precisely this frequency with impossible coherence. The probability of this occurring through random natural processes, according to Chen's statistical analysis, less than 1 in 10 million. But the electromagnetic anomaly represents merely the first layer of this deepening mystery. On October 18th, just 3 days after the initial Hubble detection, something even more unsettling occurred. Amateur radio operators across the northern hemisphere began reporting identical experiences. Unexplained interference patterns appearing across multiple frequency bands simultaneously, cascading disruptions that lasted exactly 47 seconds before vanishing completely. These weren't isolated incidents scattered randomly across the globe. They occurred in a precise geographical pattern, forming an arc across latitudes between 35 and 55 degrees north. A pattern that, when plotted on a map, traces a curved line pointing directly toward 3I Atlas's position in the sky at the exact moment of the disturbances. Marcus Rodriguez, a telecommunications engineer in Colorado with 30 years of experience analyzing signal propagation, captured detailed recordings during one of these events. He sent me the data files, and I'll admit, examining them sent a chill down my spine. The interference wasn't random static or solar flare effects or atmospheric ionization. It displayed structure, mathematical structure. Rodriguez performed a Fourier analysis, breaking down the complex signal into its component frequencies, and discovered something remarkable. The interference pattern contained repeating sequences, pulses separated by precise intervals, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. The Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical progression that appears throughout nature, yes, but finding it encoded in radio interference, synchronized with an interstellar visitor's position, that transcends coincidence and enters the realm of the genuinely inexplicable. Now, as a theoretical physicist, my training demands that I exhaust every conventional explanation before entertaining extraordinary hypotheses. So let's examine the possibilities that would allow us to maintain our comfortable assumptions about natural cosmic processes. Could these phenomena result from intense solar activity coinciding with 3I Atlas's approach? The Sun has been relatively quiet this cycle, registering no major coronal mass ejections or significant flare events during the relevant time frame. Solar wind measurements from the Parker Solar Probe show normal conditions. This explanation fails immediately. Perhaps we're observing some exotic form of cometary outgassing. Conventional comets release water vapor, carbon dioxide, dust particles. But electromagnetic emissions with phase coherence, organized radio interference encoding mathematical sequences, there exists no known mechanism through which sublimating ices or escaping gases could produce such effects. The physics simply doesn't support this interpretation. What about interactions between 3I Atlas's magnetic field and the interplanetary medium? This seems more promising initially. Charged particles flowing through magnetic field lines can indeed generate electromagnetic radiation through processes like synchrotron emission. But here's the critical problem. Those natural processes produce broadband radiation across multiple frequencies simultaneously, not narrowband emissions at specific meaningful frequencies. And they certainly don't encode mathematical progressions into terrestrial radio interference patterns. This explanation, too, collapses under scrutiny. So we find ourselves in profoundly uncomfortable territory. Every mundane explanation has failed. Every attempt to fit these observations into our existing frameworks of natural astrophysics encounters insurmountable contradictions. And now, just this morning, October 21st, with only 8 days remaining until perihelion, the situation has escalated in ways that push us even further beyond conventional understanding. The James Webb Space Telescope, humanity's most sophisticated infrared observatory, detected something that has the entire astronomical community in emergency consultation mode. 3I Atlas is emitting thermal radiation in a pattern that violates the fundamental principles of thermodynamics. Let me explain what this means. Every object in the universe above absolute zero radiates thermal energy. The hotter something is, the more energy it radiates, and this relationship follows precise mathematical laws formulated by Max Planck over a century ago. These aren't suggestions or approximations. They're ironclad physical principles verified through countless experiments and observations. Yet 3I Atlas appears to be selectively radiating more energy in specific directions than in others, creating a directional thermal emission pattern. In conventional physics, this requires either rotation with varying surface temperatures or some form of focusing mechanism, like a parabolic reflector. But spectroscopic analysis shows 3I Atlas maintains remarkably uniform surface composition and temperature across its entire visible hemisphere. There should be no mechanism producing directional preference. And here's the detail that transforms this from merely puzzling to genuinely alarming. The direction of maximum thermal emission is pointing almost exactly toward Earth. Not toward the Sun, which would make sense if solar heating were driving asymmetric outgassing, not along its trajectory vector, which might suggest some form of thrust effect, directly toward our planet, maintained with precision as both objects move through their respective orbits. Dr. James Nkomo from the European Southern Observatory ran the calculations independently, and his conclusion arrived blunt and unambiguous. Either we're fundamentally wrong about thermal radiation physics, which would overturn 150 years of validated science, or we're observing deliberate beaming. There exists no third option that reconciles the data with natural processes. Deliberate beaming. Think carefully about that phrase. It implies intentionality. It suggests purpose. It forces us to confront the possibility that 3I Atlas isn't simply reacting to environmental conditions through natural physical processes, but is actively directing energy toward a specific target, toward us. Now, I want to address something directly because I know what some of you are thinking. Michio, you're a serious scientist. Why are you entertaining these extraordinary interpretations? Why not simply admit we don't understand what's happening yet and wait for more data before drawing conclusions? And you're absolutely right to ask that question. Scientific caution represents one of our discipline's greatest strengths. But here's what I learned throughout my career studying theoretical physics. Sometimes the universe presents us with observations so fundamentally at odds with our expectations that continuing to force conventional explanations becomes more unscientific than honestly acknowledging we're witnessing something unprecedented. Let me share a historical parallel that illustrates this principle. In 1967, Jocelyn Bell Burnell discovered radio sources emitting pulses with clockwork precision, exactly 1.337 seconds apart. The signals were so regular, so impossibly precise, that her research team half-seriously labeled them LGM1, Little Green Men. They were embarrassed by even considering artificial origins. It seemed too science fiction, too sensational for serious researchers. But you know what? That initial instinct to consider extraordinary explanations wasn't wrong. It was just premature. We eventually discovered pulsars, rotating neutron stars producing natural radio beams, and breathed a collective sigh of relief. Nature had provided a conventional explanation after all. But here's the crucial difference between that historical case and our current situation with 3I Atlas. Pulsars, once understood, fit perfectly within existing physics. Rotating neutron stars with intense magnetic fields generating beamed radiation? That's exotic, certainly, but it doesn't violate any fundamental principles. What we're observing now with 3I Atlas doesn't fit. Not approximately. Not with slight adjustments to our models. It fundamentally contradicts multiple independent physical principles simultaneously. And that pattern, that signature of multiple violations occurring together, represents precisely what we would expect if we were encountering technology rather than nature. The situation intensified further just hours ago. I received an urgent communication from colleagues at the Arecibo Observatory's successor facility in Puerto Rico. They've been conducting continuous radar monitoring of 3I Atlas during its approach toward perihelion, and they've detected something that defies straightforward interpretation. When they transmit radar pulses toward the object, expecting simple reflection that would allow them to measure distance and velocity with extreme precision, something unexpected happens. The return signal arrives with anomalous characteristics. It's not simply bouncing back like radar reflecting off a solid surface or scattering off an irregular rocky body. The returning signal shows evidence of modulation. Someone or something appears to be altering the radar echo before sending it back. Dr. Lisa Park, who leads the radar astronomy team, described it this way. Imagine shouting into a cave and hearing your echo return. That's normal reflection. Now imagine shouting into that cave and hearing your echo return, but with additional words inserted into it. Words you didn't say. That's what's happening here. We're sending out a simple pulse, and we're receiving back a complex signal that contains information we didn't transmit. Information. That word hangs in the air like a question mark written in cosmic fire. What information? What is 3I Atlas trying to communicate, if indeed communication represents the correct interpretation? The radar team is currently working with cryptographers and information theorists, attempting to decode the modulation patterns, searching for mathematical structures or repeated sequences that might reveal intentional content. But even before any decoding succeeds, the mere fact that modulation exists at all pushes us across a threshold we've never approached before. And now we arrive at perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all. Since the Mars flyby on October 3rd, when 3I Atlas passed within just 29 million kilometers of the red planet, the electromagnetic disturbances we've been detecting aren't behaving as we would expect from natural cometary activity. As 3I Atlas continues its approach toward perihelion on October 29th, these disturbances aren't diminishing with distance from Mars. They're intensifying, growing stronger, expanding outward in concentric waves that now extend across nearly 40 million kilometers of space. Dr. Robert Tanaka from Tokyo University's Institute for Cosmic Ray Research has been modeling the propagation patterns, and his preliminary conclusions are deeply unsettling. These aren't random electromagnetic fluctuations, he explained during our video conference this morning. They display characteristics of a carrier wave, similar to how radio stations broadcast information. But here's what troubles me. The energy requirements to generate electromagnetic disturbances at this scale, extending across tens of millions of kilometers, would require power sources operating at levels we associate with entire planetary civilizations, not individual spacecraft or probes. And the intensity is increasing as we approach perihelion, as if building towards some kind of peak event, entire planetary civilizations. Let that sink in for a moment. We're not discussing the electromagnetic output of something the size of a satellite or even a large spacecraft. We're contemplating power generation capabilities that match the total energy budget of industrialized worlds. And this brings us face to face with a question that transcends astronomy, that touches the very foundation of humanity's place in the cosmos. What exactly did 3I Atlas trigger when it passed Mars on October 3rd? And I use that word deliberately. Trigger. Not produce, not generate, trigger. Because the more data we accumulate, the more it appears that 3I Atlas didn't create these phenomena through its own internal processes. Instead, it seems to have activated something that was already here, lying dormant, waiting. The electromagnetic disturbances propagate not just from 3I Atlas itself, but from multiple points scattered throughout the inner solar system. As if the visitor's passage through our neighborhood flipped a switch, awakening a network we never knew existed. This hypothesis terrifies me more than any other possibility. It suggests our solar system might contain infrastructure we didn't build and didn't detect. Ancient technology, perhaps millions of years old, placed by visitors who came before and departed, leaving behind monitoring stations or communication relays that activate when specific conditions are met. And 3I Atlas, with its hollow structure, its impossible deceleration, its precisely timed trajectory past Mars and now toward the Sun, might represent the key designed to activate this ancient network. I want to be absolutely clear about something crucial. Nothing I've described constitutes definitive proof of artificial origin or technological activity. Every single observation I've shared could, theoretically, result from natural processes we simply don't understand yet. New physics, exotic phenomena operating under principles we haven't discovered. The universe has surprised us before with natural explanations for seemingly impossible observations, and it will certainly surprise us again. But here's what I know as a theoretical physicist who has spent decades studying the fundamental laws governing reality. When multiple independent anomalies converge simultaneously, when conventional explanations fail across multiple unrelated physical domains, when the pattern of violations matches exactly what we would predict from design systems rather than natural processes, the probability calculation shifts dramatically. And right now, that calculation is pointing in a direction that challenges everything we thought we understood about our cosmic isolation. And here's what makes the next 8 days absolutely critical. On October 29th, 3I Atlas will reach perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, at approximately 1.36 astronomical units. That's the moment when it will be moving at its absolute maximum velocity, subjected to the most intense solar heating and radiation it will experience during its entire passage through our system. And critically, it will be positioned on the far side of the Sun from Earth's perspective. We won't be able to observe it directly during this window. Our ground-based telescopes will be useless, staring into the Sun's overwhelming glare. There will be a gap in our surveillance lasting several weeks. Think about the implications. Whatever 3I Atlas is doing, whatever it's building toward with these intensifying electromagnetic disturbances, will reach its peak precisely when we cannot watch. Avi Loeb has warned that if this object intends to use the Sun's gravity well to execute an Oberth maneuver, to slow itself down and become gravitationally captured by our solar system, perihelion represents the optimal moment. A small thrust applied at maximum velocity produces enormous changes in final trajectory. And if those electromagnetic disturbances we've been tracking represent some form of propulsion system warming up, building power, preparing for activation, then October 29th might be the day everything changes. But there's another possibility that troubles me even more deeply. What if the electromagnetic network that 3I Atlas appears to have triggered isn't designed for propulsion or communication? What if it serves a different purpose entirely? The directional thermal beaming toward Earth, the organized radio interference patterns, the radar signal modulation, all of these phenomena could represent scanning activity, reconnaissance, detailed observation of our planet, our technology, our electromagnetic signature as a civilization. And if that's true, then perihelion might not represent 3I Atlas executing a maneuver. It might represent the moment when whatever has been watching us completes its assessment and decides what happens next. The data will either show that 3I Atlas fragments like a normal comet under extreme thermal stress, releasing us from this mounting tension and allowing natural explanations to prevail. Or it will show something else, something that forces us to acknowledge we're not alone, that we've never been alone, that our solar system contains mysteries placed here long before humanity evolved to ask questions about the cosmos.